This week on Mastering Dungeons, our main topic is going to be part two of designing a starting adventure for your role-playing game campaign. We have created a village in the past. Last time we talked about doing a session zero, starting with a bang, creating interesting hooks to bring your players in and their characters into your adventure. So now let's talk about designing the adventure itself. A few caveats. We're going to talk about not teaching new players, not being a new DM, just you've got the group of players, you've played before, everyone knows what they're doing. So we're going to get into this adventure in that way. And also, there's going to be a difference between creating an adventure for your home group versus writing something that's going to be playable by all players and any DM who picks it up. The closer you are to the players and their characters, the more you can integrate those characters and their knowledge of the setting into the campaign and the adventures that you're writing. We talked, I think, a bit about using backgrounds and factions for integrating the characters into your setting, whether it's the town, the adventure, the campaign as a whole. So make good use of the backgrounds, either creating your own in the adventure or using the ones that your characters will have access to bring them into the meat of the story in a more integrated way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else you want to remind folks of or mention before we dig into the first encounter?
No, I think that's great. Like you're saying, purposeful design, right? Like um think through what they've seen and what they haven't. And that's one of the kind of hardest parts of I think what we're talking about is that it really rests on what you have done with that introduction that we talked about, right? How you've built out this town, how you've set up for these scenes, what are the hooks that you've done? Because all of that hook building could have really built a nice solid base so that this encounter can really fly. Or you might deliberately be bringing them in cold, and this first encounter is going to teach them a lot. And so where you are in that gradient of really nicely prepped for all of the themes and concepts, or getting them in the face during this encounter, well, you be aware of that and be purposeful in the design. So, because I think, in general, almost always at the end of this encounter, you want to have a good feel for the types of things that are going on, or at least really solid interest to figure that out.
For sure. And so that brings us to we've got the characters hooked in some way into this. They want to take part in this adventure. So let's talk about that first encounter that you're going to create. The kind of encounter you're going to create, what's included in it, will depend on what is the goal for your adventure and what is the goal for your campaign as a whole. So that goal for this first adventure that you run your characters through will determine the best structure for this encounter. So, for example, if this were a one shot,
Mm-hmm.
you only want to give the players and their characters as much information as they need to move on to the next, because at the end, you're just going to go your separate ways. So you only want to give the information that they need.
Yeah.
But since we're talking about a longer term campaign here, there are some things to be aware of. You want to introduce as much as you can about the adventure in the campaign and the character's special place within the adventure in the campaign. But you don't want to overwhelm them with too much information too quickly. You're going to have them hopefully for several adventures, so you can dole out that information as needed or as it brings interest to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Don't hand them a map and a key with 47 different sites in the town and a description of every NPC and what they do and how they look. That's going to be overwhelming them. Maybe at the end of the first adventure, you give them that afterwards so they can study it and
Mm-hmm.
learn, but you don't want to overwhelm them with that information. That's way too much.
Yeah.
Just start with the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like one of the things I like to think about is the difference in city design, right? Like Baldur's Gate has these three areas for the
Hmm.
outside, the walls part. And that
Right.
becomes a really easy thing both for GM and players to understand. And it creates already a picture of this inequality that exists in Baldur's
Hmm.
Gate. And then you can say, well, we're going to be in this area. What is there in this area? Oh, there are the docks, there's the blah, right? That helps.
Hmm.
Or if you think of Waterdeep and sort of it has the different wards, right?
Hmm.
That kind of neighborhood type concept is very helpful because we don't need to tell them what's in all the neighborhoods. We can just name some of them. And
Hmm.
from that, the players can say, well, we need to go to the dock ward. What can I find in the dock ward? And then we
Hmm.
can get into that. And it's tangible, it's relevant, and it won't overwhelm because we can just go into the particular mission concept we're going for.
Yeah. Yeah. And so these are the questions I like to ask when I'm creating a starting adventure in a campaign. It's what is the setting? Not just the narrow setting where the characters will start, i.e., the village that we created, but what is the setting as a whole? What are
Mhm.
some details of this setting that I can sprinkle in just a tiny bit of to get across to the players? This is where you are.
Mhm.
A Dragonlance first encounter, I want to be different than an Eberron first encounter, that I want to be different from a Dark Sun
Yeah.
first encounter. So I want to, even if it's emphasize sand in one, emphasize a lightning rail in another, and then emphasize what's a good one for
Yeah.
Dragonlance?
The army
Right, right.
people and the
Knights of Solamnia.
right.
Uh,
Yeah. Refugees, that
in
kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So get find at least one hook into the setting and put that hook in place to be able to describe that. And then in the next encounter, maybe a different detail. The next encounter, a
Hmm.
different detail. Just so it slowly builds up over time. Especially emphasize those differences if your players are used to a typical like high fantasy or sword and sorcery
Yeah,
setting.
good point.
Uh, emphasize those. So
Yeah,
if you
and I,
could,
I
oh,
might
go
just
ahead.
add to this that if the place where you are is fantastic,
Mhm.
don't not cover that, right? So fourth edition organized play adventures a lot of times tried to keep things, and this was a mandate from up high, tried to keep things low lore. But what that
Right.
sometimes translated to was you could be in a world that literally had, city, the town that had floating earth moats
I
and
was thinking the
waterfalls
same
coming
thing.
out of nowhere, and nobody
Yeah.
would describe this to you. So you just felt like you were in an everyday town. And I'm like, wait, are we in this place? Because this place is fantastic. Why
Yeah.
is the DM and the adventure not describing this? Well, it's trying to keep it simple. Lean into that cool stuff. Like
Yep.
if the place is fantastic in some way, make sure that's
Mhm.
tangible and known, and it should play out in some way, right?
Yeah. And yeah, you were as you were saying that, I was thinking of the exact place in the Four Forgotten Realms, Akinol, right,
Akano,
which
yep,
had the floating moats and
yep,
the waterfalls coming off of them. And that's a great point. If you are publishing
yeah,
something with a company that has lore and they don't want you to create new lore, what they're talking about is not atmosphere. They're talking about don't say that this inn has been there forever and is owned by this person who is linked to
yeah,
Elminster and right. Uh, but these descriptions, this flavor, you
yeah,
can
play.
still put into the adventure.
Yeah, and the theme. I mean, like we talked about Dragonlance, right? The first organized play Dragonlance adventure that's out through Baldwin Games is great because it really does help you see refugees, um,
Hmm.
somebody who's a kind of a spy or undercover from Team Evil, the Knights
Hmm.
of Solamnia and what they stand for. All these things come out in little bits and pieces as you're in these different village scenes, and that helps you really grasp this world and this story and differentiate it from any other experience without getting in the way of the encounter design. It's just part of it, right? It's there to
Hmm.
help color, and that's really nice design.
Yep, and that's the second question I would ask. Is there an atmosphere, a tone, a theme, etc., that you're going to be trying to reinforce in this campaign? And so you want to add those details in the first encounter, if possible, with bonus points if you can let the characters directly interact with those elements. So if you are in a high intrigue campaign where there is 3 or 4 power groups struggling for dominance through intrigue, you want to be able to say to the rogue character, hey, there's a criminal organization here. When you reach out to your criminal contacts, you meet this NPC. Let's role play this out. And so let them interact with that and make an intrigue plot point right away.
Mm-hmm.
Give that rogue like a secret mission. Or if there's a holy order that's involved and you have the cleric of the party or the paladin who is somehow related, give them something special to do, to be heroic in this good versus evil campaign that you're running.
Yeah. Yeah, and along themes, that colors encounter design too. So if we know that we're going to be dealing with, cult of a dead god, or god of death, then we may want to start out with a quest that takes us to a graveyard,
Mm-hmm.
because it starts coloring that experience, right? Or dealing with somebody who recently passed away, and what secrets they left behind, or something like that, but tying into that overall theme of death and so on. Whereas if we take people to a graveyard, but the theme of this is dragons, and there's nothing draconic at the graveyard, then it's disassociated, and that can be okay. But maybe we'd like to instead try to add something to it so the theme is interesting, right? The person in the graveyard was a dragon slayer of renown, right? Or there are draconic inscriptions on the headstone. Any little thing helps us start to build towards where we're going, and gets us into the heads of the player characters, have it in their heads what the theme is.
Yep. The first encounter for Acquisitions Incorporated is you in the headquarters trying to get permission to have a franchise, and you're mistaken for a very powerful group. Right. So it doesn't start out with a combat, but it starts out with this. We already know that this is going to be a comedy of errors, a bunch of chaos of taking advantage of a situation when it is presented to you. You meet the important NPCs right away, Omen Dran and Jim Dark Magic. And so right, that's that campaign, the sort of funny satire humor you're getting hit with right in the first encounter.
Yeah, and then the things you face when you go to the first combat area, and then the second as well, are all tying towards the theme of what the big bad will eventually be, so that it starts
Sure.
building towards that.
Yep. So that leads me to the next point, which I ask when I design a first adventure, first encounter, is who are the antagonists? Is it a group of evil fanatics? Okay. I'm going to introduce that in this first encounter. Not directly. I'm not going to say, oh, and now you know that,
Mm-hmm.
evil Lord so and so is the bad guy. No, you just meet a low level flunky of the sub lieutenant of the stenographer of Lord so and so. But you're on that track now. Uh, if the antagonists are rich merchants, then you want in this first encounter to see someone being taken advantage of
Yeah.
in a business transaction, and you will then get that theme reinforced right away. Uh, think about the antagonists and how to portray them at this very low, very subtle level.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can be fun. Sometimes antagonists might be a little generic, which is fine. But if we say, well, we're going up against merchants or bandits, okay, that's perfectly fine. But what if we could theme it a little bit more, right? Like if they are merchants that tend to be of items of war, right, used for war, and that ties into the plot, it'll be easier to theme it. Or if the bandits are in league with a cult, or follow a dark god, or something like, or are associated with an evil nation or something like that, it helps us color it a bit more so that we can have stronger theming around it, right? Or maybe the leader has a particular theme to them, and that ties over to
Mhm.
ways that they act, and that can help too. Right?
Yeah.
Elemental evil in
Mhm.
the classic adventure, right? Temple of Elemental Evil, you have these elemental forces. It makes it very easy to theme that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking again. I was thinking element, Village of Hamlet, and
Yeah.
how, yeah, if there are bandits that are out there raiding caravans, you go to the Inn of the Welcome Wench and you order a beer, but oh, sorry, we're all out of beer. All we have is wine, and it's really expensive because the bandits have
Hmm.
hit the caravans that were bringing the beer, so we have no beer. Right? It's very simple, but it gets the point
Yeah.
across right away. Okay, these are the consequences, um, and I'll get to that in a second, actually.
Yeah.
But there you go. And the last thing I ask myself is, who are the PC's allies, or
Mm.
who are other NPCs who are going to be important in this campaign? You want to, if possible, get them in, even if not in the first encounter, something about them or what they stand for. So
Mm.
if there is going to be a sheriff who the characters rely on for information, have that sheriff show up soon. If there's some representative of the Lord Mayor or the Queen, get them involved as soon as possible as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's really nice when the characters and the players understand that they are part of a larger whole,
Hmm.
with these allies and NPCs that are impacted by their success or failure. And so if you do something like, you defeat a sub villain and you find, plans to attack this particular NPC. That's
Hmm.
great. Right now, that ties them into the fabric of this village that we're dealing with. Um, or if, yeah, a particular person is a resource, right? The ranger in town is a little eccentric, but knows about the wild beasts that have been acting strangely lately. That gives us a resource to reach out to. And there may be more down the road. Maybe we bring them the strange herbal thing we found and we ask them about it, right? That kind of thing. That link that pays off over time strengthens your village, which you spent time on, and
Hmm.
means that it'll continue to be relevant as the adventure progresses.
Hmm. So we've got that first encounter where we want to do. You can't do all of this without very, very careful writing. So it's okay if you just do one or two of these things, but you want that at top of mind as you create further encounters. So speaking of further encounters, what you have to decide also is, how long do you want this first adventure to be? Do you want to run this huge long 8 hour epic? Do you want to run a 4 hour adventure? Do you want this campaign to consist of like 2 hour adventures? Or do you only have time to plan your lunch break? So you're going to have a campaign of 1 hour
Mhm.
sessions. Whatever that length of time is, you want it to speak to what the campaign is going to be. It can be problematic to run one 8 hour session and then do a 1 hour session and then, oh, we can get a 4 hour session and cool. Nope, this is only two, because it makes it uneven. You can do it, but it makes it harder for you as the
Yeah.
game master. And it makes it harder for the players to understand the flow of what you're going for in your campaign.
And ideally, you want to end sessions either on a resolution or a cliffhanger.
Hmm.
Right. And ideally, in a perfect world, a little bit of both, right? We defeated the evil,
Right.
but oh, look, there's this clue to the next thing. Da da da,
Yeah.
Oh, there
Yeah.
it says here that the attack is underway. We got to get back to the village. That is
Yeah.
super fun. And you'll only know that if you're writing to the cadence of what you expect play to be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that can be your own game, right? Like I tend to run now less 4 hour adventures and more 3 to 3.5 hour gaming sessions with
Hmm.
my group because of people needing to get up for work the next day and things like that. So
Yep.
I write to that in my home campaign, but for published, I
Yeah.
might write for 4 hours. And so, yeah, you think through that cadence.
Yep. So each of those lengths, whether it's 4 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour, will have a different beat pattern, different
Mhm.
pacing. With a 4 hour adventure, you're invited to create several encounters. And several encounters means you need different story beats. You need different emotional beats. You need different encounter types. You don't want to hit combat, 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 unless that's exactly what your players want. Generally, they want some role playing in there, maybe some exploration, some storytelling outside of just the combat. So you want to use a variety of those beats.
Hmm.
With a 2 hour adventure, maybe you're just looking at a couple different beats. Maybe you're looking at an sort of a setup, two encounters, and then a denouement,
Hmm.
a falling action. With a 1 hour adventure, you might be able to pull off multiple beats, but most likely you're just going to have sort of rising action, stop, and then get ready for the next time.
Hmm.
Uh, but what you do will be determined by that length. And then once you figure out the length of your adventure, you can come up with the number of encounters and the types of encounters that you deliver. The first thing that you want to make sure you do as you think of the encounters for your adventure is, did I promise anything during session zeros? Did I promise that this was going to be right a high intrigue, role play heavy adventure?
Right, right.
If you did that, you're going to need a lot of high intrigue, role play heavy encounters. Same with combat, same with exploration. Now, if you want a mix of those, then you're good. You just have to make sure you do that. But if you promised lots of combat, or if you promised lots of exploration, make sure that you give them that right away in this first adventure. A, because you promised it, but B, if it doesn't work out the way that you or the players were hoping, you still have time to fix it
Hmm.
if you do that right away. You can stop and say, okay, that was our first adventure. How is it? How is everybody feeling? And they're like, you know what? We thought we wanted a lot of exploration, but 3 hours in, when it was all exploring, I think we want more combat. Okay, we can do that uh, going forward.
Yeah, yeah, and if this is a campaign where like I think a lot of the Legend of the Five Rings play, the adventures, the organized play system would have adventures that would be tagged with specific words like combat
Mhm.
role play investigation, things like that. So you knew the kind of experience. But that also came from how they were writing these story arcs, where they knew this is not a campaign that's just combat, combat, combat. So
Mhm.
we're using these tags so you can actually skip certain things depending on what you like. But we are writing for a lot of these different elements, right? We want heavy role play adventures, heavy investigation, adventures that are really about your place in society. And so that needs to happen often. And that's that kind of thing you want to go back and think about, right? The types of pillars, the themes. If you promised pirates, then how are you going to keep delivering that if you don't, right? Or Ashes of Athos, we wanted the town that you started in to matter a lot. And we got a little bit astray for it for complicated reasons. And then we had to come back and build that in. Otherwise, we just weren't going to hit that goal. And the end was not going to matter the way we wanted it to. So we had to go back and keep hitting on that goal, on that theme until the experience was right. So that you have that. Like if this is a story of protecting the village, Seven Samurai style,
Mhm.
then we need to care about this village. We need to understand what we're protecting. We need to probably get acquainted with its surroundings and all of the facets, the groups, maybe who in town might turn against you, right? All those things. And so each encounter, each part of the adventure, we want to play out, have those things add up and be meaningful over time.
Mhm. Yeah, and the final thing I will say, which is important because this is the first adventure in your campaign, is trying to work in scenes that speak specifically to individual characters while still being important and relevant to the whole party. So you can do, I have 5 players. I'm going to make sure I have 5 encounters. And in each encounter, someone gets a spotlight. How does Belinda the Barbarian feel when a person from a rival clan is sitting in the tavern
Mhm.
in their favorite seat? They always like the end of the bar, and but
Yeah.
Wilhelmina the Barbarian is sitting there uh, in Belinda's favorite seat. You can still do everything else, but you can focus on Belinda a little bit. And then I said before, the PC with the criminal background. If you're writing a published adventure and you don't know in each individual player, the person with the criminal background gets pulled aside at the very beginning of the campaign in this first adventure and interacted with in some way. Either, hey, you're new in town, you better not do anything because we're watching you, or you want to get an in with us, steal this gem from this person at this point as they're walking down the street. Right.
Mhm.
Nothing huge, nothing that will break the campaign, but get people involved as quickly as you can on an individual level as well as on a party level.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where that session zero helps too. If we know that someone's playing the ranger and they really love tracking, and someone is playing the druid and they want to, save the forest that's been logged by the village and so on, like these things, then we want to work those themes in, right? In fact, the evil forces want to log it, or whatever it is, or the elves can be saved and partnered with, and they will help steward the forest better. And all of that can play into our plans if we spend some time each session and each designing each session thinking through what tweaks we can do for the characters.
Yeah. Now, I want to reiterate all of this is ignoring like just general encounter design stuff.
Mhm.
If you want to see my thoughts on writing an adventure, go to Let's Design an Adventure on D&D Beyond. There's 10 articles that follow one along the other to talk about adventure design. Check that out. We're
Mhm.
specifically talking here about initial adventures for your campaign.
Yeah.
Uh, and for the finale of your first adventure, how do you handle that? What you want to do is show the characters the consequences of their successes and their failures played out in that finale. Uh, to end the first session, you want to resolve those first important questions, but also open up new questions that the players will be exploring in future adventures and throughout the campaign. So, in that first adventure, especially if it's a longer adventure, you want there to feel like there was a resolution. Undead were coming out of the graveyard. We have to find out why that is. Oh, that is so because there was an evil artifact placed in the mausoleum at the center that was sending out necromantic waves that brought the dead back to life. Okay, we found it. We destroyed it. Okay, we did that. But the question is, who put it there? The question is, why did they put it there? What, those things. Maybe there were special gold engravings on it that were made with gold from a nearby mine. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that leads us to that. So you want to resolve while also opening up new things. And Teos mentioned this earlier as well.
If we just do something as simple as say, okay, they're cultists. They're gonna sacrifice the town mayor because of her lineage or something like that. And so we're gonna arrive just in time as the ritual is happening, and we're gonna stop it. That's fine, right? That's good. There are clear consequences for what you did, clear resolution. You saved or did not save them. The mayor's going to be happy, but we can do more than that by having some interesting pieces to the puzzle. Like maybe there is something that the ritual hinges upon that we can use to counter it. And we learned this earlier. Do the players do that thing? Because it also has a drawback.
Mhm.
Now the end scene will have an additional payoff where you get to see that impact, right?
Mhm.
Um, or maybe there were some parts when you were dealing in the village, learning about all these setups, where you could have really impressed the town mayor before they were kidnapped.
Mhm.
Now the payoff could be bigger when they are set free because of that additional work you did, or you consolidated power with some other groups that were squabbling or something like that. all of it could mean that at the end of the adventure, maybe the mayor rewards them with something like the deed to a place,
Mhm.
right? Or running a certain thing, playing a role for the town. That could all be really interesting. Um, and extend that sort of consequence and success state to make it more interesting. You don't have to do that, but it's an option to think through whether you want to have that kind of a little more teeth, a little more payoff, something a little more permanent. You brought up that the artifact, right? Maybe you could have destroyed it, or you could have put it back where it came from, and those can have different implications depending on which way
Mhm.
you go, and that could pay off in that end scene too.
Yeah. And you'd mentioned cliffhangers before, and I want to speak to that because we tend to think of cliffhangers as bringing excitement and bringing a sense of anticipation. And you want to use that anticipation to its highest degree. So, ending in the middle of combat, some people say, well, it's a cliffhanger, right? we
Mm.
we just we we went into this area where we thought that the cult was operating, and all of a sudden a dragon swoops down and breathes on us. All right, we take 23 points of acid damage from this black dragon. Oh, and that's the end. That is a cliffhanger, but it might not be the cliffhanger that you want, because what will happen is the players will be focused not on, oh, did we find the cultists or not? Oh, did we do the right thing when we came to this place? All they're thinking is, okay, so we need to find some way to deal with this acid. How are we going to kill this dragon? That can be good,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a very short term cliffhanger. You want them to be pondering the longer term plots, the longer
Yeah.
term things that are investing them in the whole campaign, not just in this one encounter.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't tend to use a lot of cliffhangers for that
Mhm.
reason. I rather would have it be a little more like a TV show serial episodes where it's like sort of,
Right.
quiet ending, good strong resolution. Then you start, whether it's an exciting start, but it's a new start or it's a introduction, and
Mhm.
then we get into the meat of it and resolve it again.
Yeah. So just think about where you want your players' focus and cliff hang where you want their focus to be. You want
Yeah.
what they will be thinking about in the week or the 2 weeks or however long between sessions. And if you do that, things we just talked about, you will have, I think, created a fine opening adventure for your tabletop role-playing game slash D&D campaign. So overall, then, at the end of that first adventure, your characters should understand the setting, understand its tone, and some of the major elements of the campaign, NPCs, power groups, etc. They should have a clear understanding of the first steps of the campaign. What are their goals going to be going forward? How are they going to go about achieving those goals? They should have an idea of different directions they could take when they start the next
Mm.
session. They
Mm.
should understand what's at stake. And it may be a small stake to start out with. It may just be trying to protect the mayor from future cult attacks. It could be uh, it could be world shattering if you want to start with that right away. It could be the rain of fire as the dragons
Right.
come down. That could be, if you want to go big, if you want to go epic, they'll understand that right away. That's okay too. But they should understand that if they fail to act, these are going to be the consequences of the action. You will have a world of undead creatures if you don't stop this necromancy cult from spreading beyond this town.
Mhm.
And give them leads, give them a place to explore next, a person to question next, something that where they know when they sit down that this is going to be the next step in our adventure.
Yeah, I love that. And there's so many parts of this that you can tweak, right? If you think of these as different dials, like the
Mhm.
setting and tone, and you can draw from that and dial certain parts up and down. The villains, the stakes, the uh, the characters themselves. That all of these are different elements you can play with that can make things really exciting, right? So if we say like if I think of I think it's Shotguns on Sorcery, the setting, you know, it has this idea that everybody is in a city with all these undead outside, and I think ruled by a dragon. But there are these different power groups, right? And so it's very easy to understand the setting and the tone and the constraints. We're all in the city, outside death, don't let the undead in. But now we can think through, okay, you know, what is my first step in the campaign and where am I going with this? Like maybe I'm going with there's somebody from the inside who's looking to let the undead in, right? But that might start with something like merchants fighting and disrupting the power balance. And so we can develop all these different pieces. And well, what are the characters tied to? So where are the characters going to go with this? And all of that becomes a little bit of a mess. But to me, that's my favorite thing, right? I like to sort of think of a mess of stuff and then simplify it down to clear things that happen in the adventure, but that will link with these strong themes to the PCs, to the villains, to the plot where it's going, to the setting. And that's how you get a really great experience, right?
That's right. So we hope this has been helpful to you in creating an adventure to launch your campaign. Thank you so much for everyone who's listening and who has been contacting us to tell us that they like what we've been covering. Some of them have even become patrons of our show. And we appreciate that. We've had a few new patrons recently. Thank you. If you would like to become a patron of the show, you can do so by going to patreon.com/masteringdnd and supporting us in any way that you see fit, and we appreciate that. We have many Master of Dungeon supporters. We have a few Master of the Realm supporters, and we do have a select group who have become supporters that we call Masters of the Multiverse. So we want to thank Chris Webster. I said it right this time. Javier Waziak. I probably said it wrong this time. Graham Ward, James Walton, Joe Tyler, Trace, Krishna Simonse, Andy Shockney, Ross Sandberg, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Vladimir Prunner from Croatia, Robert Pasley, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Mighty Zeus, Mike Olson, Tom Nelson, who created the deck of player safety, which is sitting on my shelf right there. Falcon Neal, Shawn Molly, John Mickey, Eric Mengi, the Mathemagician, Chad Lench, Jim Klingler, aka DM Prime Mover, Brian King, Chad Jackson, Sean Hurst, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, The Mighty Jerd, Nathan Fuller, Andy Edmonds at nerdronomicon.com, Evil John, Merrick Blackman, Steve Bissonette, Craig Bailey, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, not Crazy Wolf Studios, and finally, Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing. Thank you so much for being Masters of the Multiverse for us. Thank you to all our listeners and to all our patrons. If you like the show, do consider supporting the Patreon. Also, if you get a chance, please leave us a review on Apple Podcast or by whatever means you listen to this podcast. And if you watch us on YouTube, you can subscribe, which would bump us up the list of shows that you want to see more of. Teos, where can people find you and your work?
Find me at alphastream.org. And yeah, I posted on Mastodon pictures of my gaming room, which is starting to come together. I'm very happy. I hung up 3 different pieces of art last weekend out of the many to choose from. It's fun.
Nice. You can find me on all the socials at Shawn Merwin. You can follow the podcast at Mastering D&D on many of those platforms. You can join our community and you can communicate to us via the Patreon. You can leave comments on Mastering Dungeons YouTube channel. And there is only 2 days left when this show drops on the Surviving Strange Hollow Kickstarter. If you've backed it, I thank you so much. Please check it out in the next couple of days. See if it's something you would enjoy, and we would really appreciate the support there. The team of writers and the Accidental Cyclops folks and Emily Hare, the artist. We would love your support. So, with all that said, we have finished our first adventure here in our campaign. So, what are we going to do now?
Well, in addition to telling all my friends about surviving Strange Hollow, I'm going to start applying all these concepts to my campaign world, where exercise and health have been threatened by the bunnies that lay
no.
chocolate eggs. Until this threat has been destroyed, our exercise, our plans, our health are threatened. What am I going to do, Shawn?
I'm going to eat a lot of jelly beans and then go take a long rest.
Amen.
Amen.